A very warm morning to one and all present here. And Dr. Parthasarthi started with asking a difference between or how can we connect with the mic and the water bottle. I would just tell the panelists, please use the mic. If you don't use the mic, you will have to use the water bottle quite often. So, on that note, let me start this panel discussion with just a small quote of Steve Jobs. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently, the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who can do it. And here we have an esteemed panel of members who have thought differently and who have made the first step in changing the world. So today the topic is where do ideas come from? So before we actually throw upon the questions, let me just brief you about how the panel discussion will be going on. We will have few starting remarks by all the panelists. We will have few questions to start with and then it will be thrown open to the audience for their interactions. So please keep your questions ready. Let the questions be small and a statement form. We will not prepare a thesis here so that we can complete or maybe take the advantage of the maximum questions that can be covered in the panel discussion. So to start with, I will just ask all the esteemed members here sitting on the panel to share their personal ideas of what idea creation was for them and in their personal life, how does it matter for them and what have they done in their workspace or in their personal life in idea creations. We will start with Dr. Pavan Soni.
Okay, so so I want to touch upon three things to begin with. The first is that how is creativity different from the another common word that we've been using called innovation. The second point would be how is creativity not same as intelligence, because we often end up confusing intelligence with creativity. And the third thing, doing justice to the panel that we have, is I want to give you a scientific explanation why women are more creative than men. Hmm? So that will give me bonus 2 minutes. So first thing first, innovation and creativity. Now, in the corporate chores, we have been using these two words quite interchangeably, and if not that, then we bake in another words like invention, innovation, R&D, ideas, etc. I think it's very important for us to understand that innovation is not same as creativity. To begin with, what is creativity? Creativity is the ability of an individual, such as yourself, or a group of individuals to generate ideas which are novel and useful, which means that creativity has to have these two conditions, which is novelty and utility. If something is not novel, it is nothing but common sense. And if something is not useful, then it is nothing but daydreaming. And hence, creativity is neither common sense nor daydream. So there is some threshold to it. Now let us move on to what is innovation. Innovation is the ability of an organization, and not of an individual, of an organization to commercialize new ideas. Which is to say that creativity is about generating ideas, innovation is about commercializing ideas. And we should never ever assume that if you are running an organization or a startup, creativity is it. It's just a starting point. Many times organizations have really grown big by commercializing somebody else's ideas as well. A good example is of course Steve Jobs. And he very famously, eloquently said that good artists steal. But he also said that great artists ship. So shipping is always more important than creation. That's the first bit. The second thing is about intelligence versus creativity. And now why this topic is very, very critical is because any organization that you work for or run, you have always hired people based upon their intelligence. Right from the moment they take birth, we need 70% marks. The problem is that we hire for intelligence, but we expect creativity. Am I right? You're only looking at the intelligence of the person, that how many times he has scored some amazing marks, etc. Even in CAT, by the way, we are essentially looking at intelligence, that in a very short amount of time. But we expect people not to be intelligent, but to be creative. And in the advent of artificial intelligence, I think the scariest thing that we'll be left with is creativity. So I wanted us to use this board, me to use this board for depicting the point. Do we have a marker by any chance? Ah, yeah, there's a marker. Okay, so if you can follow me on the screen very quickly, without much ado, tell me what's coming next. Okay, tell me what's coming next. What's next? What's next? Inverted U? Okay, cool. What's coming next? This one? What's coming next? What can come next? C? Can anything else come here? Can anything else come? That's it? Only C can come? Cannot U come here instead of this? Or can the inverted U come here instead of this? Now what happened was that in this particular case, you very quickly told me this is coming. And this particular case, you told me very much this is coming. But whereas in this particular case, we had couple of options. What's the difference between question 1, 2 and question 3? Pattern. Pattern recognition. Correct? You could recognize patterns here, but there was no pattern to recognize here. Now, if you look at any IQ test, and I would strongly encourage, being a Saturday, you might want to go back home and take an IQ test. Any IQ test is nothing more and nothing less than checking your pattern recognition abilities. Now, if intelligence is about finding a pattern, what is creativity? If intelligence is about finding a pattern, what is creativity? Yeah, before creating a pattern, it is about breaking the pattern. Now, how easy or difficult it is for us to break a pattern? Is it easy or difficult? Very difficult, am I right? Just to demonstrate how difficult it is to break a pattern, all of you just fold your hands like this. Right, and check which hand is above, left or right. Yeah, depends upon. There's nothing biologically correct or incorrect. Yeah. So in my case, it is in left hand. Now just straighten up your hands like this, relax. And once again, fold your hands. This time, the other hand has to come above. Other hand. Now, was it easy? It was not easy. For such a trivial thing, we have a pattern. It doesn't serve any utility, by the way. There's no utility of this, whether this is better than this, there's no utility, but still we have patterns. So what happens, the reason why we have so many patterns in our lives for everything almost, right from brushing up the teeth to which side of the bed you wake up, henceforth and so on. The beauty of pattern is that patterns reduce cognitive load. That's why we have patterns. The very fact that we've been surviving where our brain that requires 20% of the oxygen in the body, whereas it weighs about 6.5% in terms of body weight, generally speaking. The reason is that our brain functions because we have patterns. Patterns are difficult to break. Humans are slaves of patterns. These stars which are spread out billions of light years away are not standing any pattern, but we mere mortals always find patterns. And hence, intelligence is about creating, finding, following, and predicting a pattern. Whereas what is creativity? Breaking and recreating the patterns. And as you just saw yourself, breaking pattern is non-trivial, especially with machines coming in. So never confuse intelligence with creativity, never confuse innovation with creativity. Now let's go to the third and the juicier part, which is women and creativity. Now, for long we have had this notion that human brain has two halves, the left half and the right half. Except that in people like me, there is nothing left in the right half and there is nothing right in the left half. But let us live with this assumption for the time being that there is a right half, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. The right hemisphere of human brain is accountable for what we call as your feelings. And the left hemisphere is accountable for thinking. So let's call this the feeling brain and the thinking brain. Now, the assumption for a while has been that most of your cognitive abilities come from the right half of the brain. But now with fMRIs, etc., CT scans, people have increasingly been realizing that it is neither the left nor the right, but it is the prefrontal cortex, this part of the brain, which is accountable for creativity. It's not this or this, it is this part of the brain, which is that brain requires you to assimilate what is feasible and what is practical for it to be really called creative, which is again going back to the novelty and the utility part of it. Now, the two halves of the brain are connected by a cord called the corpus callosum. Corpus callosum is more or less like the umbilical cord that connects the mother to the child at the time of birth. The corpus callosum in a woman is 2 times as thick as in a man. 2 times. So if men's corpus callosum is this, a women's corpus callosum is 2 times as thick. Which means what? In a very practical sense, it means that women find it very difficult to think without feeling. Feelings are always embedded in their thinking. And the corollary is that they cannot feel without thinking. So thinking without feeling and feeling without thinking is almost impossible for a woman. And as a result, and I'll again connect it back to creativity in a little while from now. As a result, what happens is that they're always evaluating and generating ideas simultaneously. Whereas something that we'd never advocate, that generating ideas and evaluating ideas should be two separate exercises, separated by time and intent, and not should be done simultaneously. Whereas a man can very easily, and we have had so many examples, right from warfare to sports to back home, men very easily can mute their feelings when they are thinking, and can very easily mute their thinking when they are feeling. And as a result, they get quickly very carried away. Coming back to the corporate context, which most of our are most interested in, though it's an academic institution, but we need to have non-academic debates as well. So, from a very practical perspective, what is very critical is the importance of diversity. Diversity not just in terms of gender. Gender is the most fault line diversity, which is highly visible, but all the nuanced diversities that we have in. And diversity, needless to say, encourages creativity. So my parting thoughts, three things: that while the big question is that can creativity be taught, the answer is no. To the question that can creativity be learned, the answer is an affirmative yes. Which is to say that creativity cannot be taught, but creativity can be learned. And that's a hope that all of us have right now. Three takeaways, if you can chew upon. The first thing is that for you to be creative, keep in mind that creativity is nothing more and nothing less than a skill. Like swimming, like cooking, like dancing, like painting, creativity is nothing but a skill. Can it be practiced? It can be. How do you practice creativity? The first thing is have multiple affiliations, which is try to pack your life with as many identities as you can have. Like of a teacher, like of a singer, you're learning Bharatnatyam somewhere, you are learning cooking classes somewhere else, you are joining weekend classes at IIM Bangalore, you're helping organize a blood donation camp, you're trekking to some hill station on the weekends. Pack your life with multiple dimensions. That's point number one. The second point is be experimentative. Be experimentative in the clothes you wear, the food you eat, the places you go to, the movies you watch, the books you read, the people you meet, and the way you carry out your day. Be experimentative. And the third, and in my opinion, the most important skill that you need to be creative is to have a thick skin. Moti chamdi. You need to have a thick skin. Very important. Because if you get so perturbed when people ridicule you, be rest assured that you will never ever think of anything but mediocrity. Have a thick skin. Right from Abraham Lincoln to Mahatma Gandhi to John Kennedy, all these loud people had people hating them so much so that they were shot at a point blank range. It's only because of thick skin that Donald Trump rules the roost out there. Have a thick skin. Which is to simply say, and I'll pause at this moment, which is to simply say that don't take yourself seriously. Don't take yourself seriously. Because don't take yourself seriously because nobody takes you seriously. Nobody takes you seriously. So take it easy. Take it easy. Pack your life with multiple activities and experiment on a daily basis because who knows what? Today may be your last day. So be creative. Thank you so much.